Growing up, we had one TV in the house, one, and whoever was willing to get up and turn the knob controlled everything. And there were certain shows where the second that theme song started, you either jumped up and changed it, or you just sat there knowing bedtime was about 15 minutes away. Today we're counting down 20 TV shows that every 70s and 80s kid absolutely dreaded. Starting with number 20. Number 20, Little House on the Prairie. Now look, I wanted to put this one much higher up on the list because I really did dread watching it. I had an older sister and a younger sister, and we had one TV, and if there was a vote, they always would choose Little House on the Prairie over anything else that was on. And here's the thing, here's why it's not higher up on the list. It was actually kind of awesome once you got into it. Laura Ingalls was the main character, but Laura had a sister named Mary. Now Mary was blind, and it was the first time I'd ever seen blind people on TV. Well, maybe that guy from Kung Fu, the master, but this was another blind person. Then you have Albert, and Albert was kind of a bland character, but then he gets a morphine problem, and I forget how he got the morphine problem exactly, but it's a 2-part episode. And then part 2, he's going through withdrawals and stuff. This was just kind of funny to me. They had this in Little House on the Prairie. They're showing him, and he's like, I need to get my fix. And he's sweating and stuff. And I think he takes the morphine and puts it into tea and then drinks it. I don't even know if that's a thing, right? And you had Nellie Olson, and Nellie Olson was just this kind of bitchy blonde girl, super spoiled, and was always giving Laura Ingalls attitude. And so Laura Ingalls, also known as Half Pint, has had enough of her crap. So Half Pint rolls Nellie up to the top of the hill, turns around and pushes her wheelchair down the hill, where Nellie just starts rolling out of control, and her mom watches while screaming in horror. It was golden TV. So although I didn't want to watch that, there was all sorts of random awesome things that happened. That's why this one's number 20 and not number 1 or number 2. Number 19, 8 is Enough. The only cool thing about 8 is Enough is the human pyramid they do in the beginning. We've all tried that. Otherwise, it's super dorky, and they're trying to teach you lessons and stuff through the story, and we just thought we were too cool for any of that. But there are some fun things I want to point out, a little bit of trivia. Mark Hamill was in the pilot episode of 8 is Enough, but in the meantime, after he landed this role, he got the role for Luke Skywalker in Star Wars. So he began filming Star Wars, I believe, a month before they started filming this pilot episode, and Star Wars took off, so he got out of his contract. He was only on for 1 episode. So let's talk about Willie Ames. Willie played the middle brother named Tommy in 8 is Enough. After 8 is Enough, he lands a role with Scott Baio in an Oscar-worthy film called Zapped. So in the movie Zapped, Scott Baio is doing a chemistry experiment, and the chemicals explode in his face. So of course he gets telekinetic powers. And what does he use them for? He uses his telekinetic powers for removing girls' clothing for the most part, like lifting their skirts, popping open their sweaters. They could never release this movie today. It was kind of problematic. It was a teen sex comedy along the lines of Porky's or Revenge of the Nerds. It was one of those movies that we never saw at our house. It was always that one friend that had Showtime or something, and you'd have to be at a slumber party, and the parents would go to bed, and then that would come on, and we'd be like, jackpot. So he was in that movie, and then he got to star in a movie with Phoebe Cates, and we all loved Phoebe Cates. As a 12-year-old watching this movie, we thought this was a work of art. Anyways, 8 is Enough. The show really sucked. We turned it immediately whenever possible. Even my sisters didn't like this one. That's why this one's number 19 on the list. Number 18, The Waltons. I'm not sure if I wasn't paying attention, but The Waltons was set in the Great Depression. I was just doing research on it. One thing I didn't miss, and the one thing my whole family complained about, was John Boy. John Boy had this big mole on his cheek, on his left cheek. I found out they tried to show the right side of his face whenever possible, or they would put a little bit of makeup on it to try to make it less prominent. But after a while, they just gave up. We're just going to go with it. And I remember my grandma or my aunt or somebody saying, like, he has money now. Why doesn't he get that cut off? And the actor who played the grandpa, named Will Geer, was kind of a wild guy in real life. So he played this wholesome grandpa. But I guess in his regular life, he considered himself the world's oldest hippie. and he belonged to communes, and he belonged to a nudist colony for a little bit, which is just crazy to think about. One other fact about the show, the house they used for the Waltons burned down, but was rebuilt in the 90s for a reunion special. And several years later, they used that house in Gilmore Girls as the Dragonfly Inn. I did like Gilmore Girls. I just loved the characters. The mom was very attractive and had a cool relationship with her daughter. Stars Hollow was great, so I do recommend that show if you've never seen it. Number 17, Taxi. Now, the thing about Taxi was that theme song in the beginning is such a downer. I don't even think we made it past 5 or 6 notes of that song. That was a quick channel flip for us for sure. And then if you did wind up watching a little bit of it, it looked like just some kind of grimy taxi garage thing. And just as a kid, you're just not interested in any of that. One plus is they had the guy from Grease, Jeff Conway. And I found out through research that he actually was married to Olivia Newton-John's sister. So I think it's Rona Newton-John. And Olivia Newton-John was a pure goddess back then. For me at that age, there was 2 women in particular that really stood out. Olivia Newton-John and Linda Carter. And I didn't appreciate Danny DeVito until years later on Always Sunny in Philadelphia. He plays the dad on the show, and I just love his sense of humor. All those guys are hilarious. But to me, he kind of makes the show. It wouldn't be the same show without him. He joined, I believe, in season 3 or something like that. But just a great character. Anyway, at our age, being a kid, Taxi was not a show aimed at us. It was an instant switch. Number 16, Trapper John M.D. I'm not sure you could choose a name that would repel more kids than Trapper John M.D. Anyway, so you know it's about a doctor, right? What I didn't know until today was it was a spinoff of MASH. And you know MASH is on this list. You know that we turned the channel on that one immediately. But it was a spinoff of MASH, a show we didn't like. Not a whole lot of trivia here, but what I will say is that Pernell Roberts, the main character on Trapper John M.D., was on Bonanza, and so was Lauren Green. Lauren Green played Adama on Battlestar Galactica, and that show was awesome. We were not changing the channel on that show. That was a 10 out of 10. Number 15, Murder, She Wrote. This show was made for old people, I'm convinced. That's what kind of the rumor was, and it worked because if you're young, you did not want to watch it. One thing I will say was, being a kid, I thought everybody was like 70 or 75 on these shows just because we were so young. But I looked it up, and so Angela Lansbury was 58 years old in the first season, which kind of freaks me out because I'm 56 years old right now. And in my mind, I feel like I don't think I look like this. Maybe I do. Well, to a young person, I probably do. So maybe young people think that I'm 75. I don't know. Anyways, enough of that. Let's go on to the next on the list. Number 14, Matlock. So Matlock was a lawyer show, which instantly made it a no-go as a kid at that age. Lawyers and doctor shows were just boring, right? So we didn't want to watch that. So we'd watch trucker shows like BJ and the Bear, or policeman shows like Chips. But if it was lawyers or doctors, no, that's going to be a no from us. I did recognize Andy Griffith from the Andy Griffith Show, but that was in syndication. We didn't watch that in real time. That seemed really old-fashioned, and this seemed like an old-fashioned lawyer show, so we didn't watch it. I guess one interesting thing was he had to wear knee braces during the show, and he had to stand up a lot. So after each scene, the people, directors and producers, would give him a standing ovation. And he reignited his career after the Andy Griffith Show, so good on him for that. Number 13, Quincy, or the true title, Quincy M.E. M.E. stood for medical examiner, and Quincy did autopsies. Nobody wants to see that. Blood makes me queasy, so I definitely didn't watch this one at all. But there is a famous episode in 1982 that was about punk rockers and the evils of punk rock and how it's a murderous cult. And we loved stuff like that when the silent generation and the boomers would try to show us what we were doing. They were trying to warn people about the evils of the punk rock scene. I just watched a few clips on YouTube from it. It's hilarious. So although we didn't watch this show, I do recommend that episode. Number 12. Lou Grant. They seemed to use just a person's name as titles of shows back then. I don't know if that's good marketing. I guess now I think about it, maybe there wasn't that many shows, so you would know everybody's name on a show, because this was a spinoff of the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So maybe you just take a very popular show, and then if you knew the characters' names, maybe you could continue a TV show just with the name of the character, which is what they did. So this show was a 1-hour drama where he was a city editor of a newspaper. He's a journalist. So, we're not watching that. I guess it was a good show because he won 2 Emmy Awards for lead actor in this show. He won 3 Emmy Awards as a supporting actor in the Mary Tyler Moore Show. So, a great character, but as a kid, we're not watching this. Number 11, Barnaby Jones. Another name as the title of a show. What is up? So supposedly he's like a clean living detective, and instead of smoking cigars and cigarettes and drinking whiskey, he would drink a glass of milk each episode. I read that he couldn't stand milk. He had a hard time gagging it down, which is kind of funny. And the most obvious trivia here is he played Jed Clampett on the Beverly Hillbillies. He's the one that shot the ground. And in the song they say, "Oil that is, black gold, Texas tea." So anyway, he was on that TV show, and I didn't really watch that too much either. Watched a little bit of it. But again, an old guy drinking milk, and he's a detective. That wasn't our thing. We turned the channel immediately. Number 10, Hee Haw. I'm 100% convinced you lose IQ points by watching too much Hee Haw. They'd pop up from a corn patch. I just remember seeing little bits and pieces of it and just thinking, wow, this is dumb. But I guess a lot of country music stars were on it, but I wouldn't recognize them because that's not what we were listening to at the time. This is during the era of MTV, so we're not listening to Roy Clark or Buck Owens. We were watching like Duran Duran, Flock of Seagulls, Human League. This just seemed really old-fashioned to me at the time, so it was an instant click away. Number 9. Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters. So I was raised on the West Coast, near bigger cities on the West Coast, so we were never exposed to country music unless it was Dolly Parton or Willie Nelson or Kenny Rogers. I can't think of anybody else. So we had no idea who these people were on the show. I guess that they changed their wardrobes like 10 or 11 times during the show, and it was known as high fashion country, which to me, those don't really go together very well. I don't picture high fashion and country being a thing. And if I'm going to watch somebody sing in sparkly clothes, I'm going to watch Solid Gold. Solid Gold was legit, and Barbara Mandrell and the Mandrell Sisters, people we didn't know singing boring country music, that was an easy no from us, and we'd turn the channel immediately. Number 8, Donahue. Looking back, Donahue was probably a show that I was just too young for, or we were just too young for. It won several awards. It was the first show where he would bring the mic to the audience and he would talk to people in the audience. And then Oprah Winfrey says that without Phil Donahue, there would be no Oprah. So he was a pioneer in the way talk shows were done. In 1977, he had Marlo Thomas on the show. And in 1980, they got married. And they stayed married until his death in 2024. And in 2024, before he passed away at the age of 88, he was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, which is the highest civilian honor in the United States. But as a kid, we were impressed by none of that. This was no Dukes of Hazzard. It wasn't the A-Team. It was Next Channel. Number 7, Dallas. This show was a big deal. I remember being a kid and being at the grocery store, and all the magazines had Who Shot JR. It was a huge, huge deal. The episode where they show Who Shot JR aired on November 1980, and it was watched by 83 million people, so 76% of all television viewers that night. Here's the greatest thing about that. To make sure that it didn't get leaked out Who Shot JR, the producers filmed every single cast member shooting JR, including Larry Hagman himself. So even the actors didn't know who the shooter was until the episode aired. That's just crazy. Another funny fact is during the 1980 presidential campaign, Republicans handed out buttons that said, "A Democrat shot JR." There's also one other funny piece too. So Patrick Duffy, Bobby Hewing, decided to leave the show, and his character was killed off in a dramatic car accident, but then ratings dropped substantially. So then Larry Hagman eventually convinced Patrick Duffy to return. To explain his resurrection, the writers had Bobby's wife Pamela wake up and realize the entire previous season, 31 episodes, had been a dream. That might be one of the funnier things I've ever heard about when it comes to a show's plot. I never watched the show, but I do realize it was a huge, huge deal back then. As an adult, I probably would have liked it. I liked the show Succession on HBO, which kind of has a similar idea behind it, like a rich family. But as a kid, we hated it, so instant channel turn. Number 6, Dynasty. Dynasty is basically Dallas. In fact, it was made to compete with Dallas. The original title of the show was Oil. So here's all we got to know about Dynasty I remember Joan Collins was on that, and that's the first time I heard of her, but like my parents were impressed. And I remember Joan Collins would fight with Linda Evans. Joan Collins with the curly dark hair, and then Linda Evans with the blonde hair, and it was just cat fights between the two. That's all I can think of when it comes to the show. Maybe that's where Prince came up with the line, "You don't have to watch Dynasty to have an attitude." But some trivia, I guess they spent $25,000 per episode on fresh flowers to decorate the Carrington Mansion. And I guess the designer was named Nolan Miller, and they spent $35,000 per episode on the wardrobe. And he was largely credited with making shoulder pads a global phenomenon. And that's not a good thing. Later on, Linda Evans was interviewed, and she joked, "There were times Joan and I could not walk through a door at the same time. We were too big." So that horrible fashion trend from the 80s was due to Dynasty. As a kid, we did not love this show, and it was an instant channel change. Number 5, Falcon Crest. Come on, Falcon Crest. You just know that's going to be a terrible show if you're a kid back then. Who chose that name? So some good names would be like Land of the Lost, Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, Banana Splits, Captain Caveman, but Falcon Crest, you just know that's going to be boring. So Falcon Crest was created by the same people who made Dallas. It was basically Dallas, but instead of being in Dallas, it was in Napa Valley. So an interesting piece of trivia, which I didn't know until today, was Jane Wyman, the main actress on the show and Hollywood legend, was also the first wife of Ronald Reagan. And to avoid any political awkwardness, it was reported that there's an unwritten rule on the set that nobody was allowed to mention Reagan's name in her presence. And Jane Wyman was so powerful that she had a clause in her contract that if she didn't like a line, it didn't get said, period. Anyway, as a kid, all these old people, we don't know who they are. We're not appreciating any of this. We don't care about the Wine Valley. So that would be a no for us, and we'd be looking for another channel immediately. Number 4, Masterpiece Theater. Now look, this is a rough one for me because I didn't like it as a kid, and I honestly don't think I'd like it as an adult. I'm not going to lie, it just seems really boring to me. Like even today, it feels like people who liked Masterpiece Theater back then would love Downton Abbey, but I can't go near that show either. The whole thing seems really boring to me. Maybe that says something about me, but if you can relate, just please comment below that like I'm not alone here, because Masterpiece Theater, Downton Abbey, those are just snooze fest. So one fun fact about the show is that the host was teleprompter free. So he would type the script every morning and then memorize it word for word all the way and wouldn't use a teleprompter. And honestly, that is a pretty tough deal. So, yep, he memorized it, and it doesn't matter to us as kids. We quickly skipped this show immediately. We saw those leather-bound books and the classical music playing. That was a quick flip. Number 3, Lawrence Welk. Now, this show, I ended up watching it a lot. I think my grandparents liked it. So I could understand my grandparents liking it, but I remember asking my dad, "Why are you guys watching it?" Because my dad and mom watched it one time without my grandparents there, and I thought it was odd because even as a kid, I knew this show was square. It was really behind the times. It just was like the opposite of Gen X. If you're Gen X, this is like your kryptonite, man. It was not what we were all about. But despite all that, there was a very funny episode where these two people sang a song called One Toke Over the Line. And in the song, they say the words, Sweet Jesus, and they talk about being at a train station. So Lawrence Welk thought this was like a gospel song. But I guess people who knew better were just laughing and thought it was the funniest thing ever. I think it's hilarious. I'll play you a part right now.
One toke over the line, sweet Jesus, one toke over the line.
So obviously I like that episode, and I do remember there was a tap dancer that we were impressed by. But as a kid in the 80s, there's no way we are watching this unless our parents or grandparents are in charge of the remote. And I do have to apologize, I keep saying remote, but back then in like the 70s and even early 80s, we didn't have a remote. The remote was somebody getting up and physically turning the channel. Number 2, MASH. This might be a controversial take, but that theme song is a downer. I mean, a serious buzzkill, a bummer. It puts you in depression, I think. I don't know why, but it gives me PTSD. If I hear that song even now, I just get bad feelings, bad vibes. And you see like an army truck or something, and it's like this downer song, and it's driving around, and there's like tents around. It's a war situation. I don't know why anyone would voluntarily watch this show. The person who wrote the MASH song should hang out with the person who wrote the Taxi song, because that song will put you in a bad mood immediately. Like, why is that? As a kid, this show was pepper spray, but adults loved this show. The series finale in 1983 was one of the most watched episodes of all time. It was watched by 106 million viewers, making it the most watched television episode in history for nearly 30 years. It was only surpassed by the Super Bowl in 2010. And another fun fact about it, New York City's sanitation department reported a massive spike in water usage immediately following the finale. So many people had waited for the show to end to use the bathroom at the exact same time that it actually affected the city's water pressure. But as a kid back then, we were unimpressed by all of this. Now we have to get to number 1. It's the most dreadful show of all time, not because of the show, but what it represents. 60 Minutes. And if you're Gen X, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because that ticking clock was stressful. That ticking sounds a Pavlovian trigger. If you grew up in the 70s and 80s, that ticking stopwatch was the sign that the weekend is over, your homework is definitely not finished, and in less than 12 hours, you have to take a bath in the morning and go to school. I didn't even dislike school, but just that ticking clock just made it stressful. And there's nothing as an adult that reaches that level of stress, in my opinion. Maybe doing taxes, maybe. I don't even care about the show. That ticking watch just got to you. So that's my list. 20 TV shows that had every 70s and 80s kid either jumping up to change the channel or just sitting there dreading what came next. I know I missed some, so drop it in the comments. What show had you running for the knob the second it came on?